Now, U.S. health officials are issuing grim warnings as America braces for an alarming post-holiday rise in COVID-19 cases. Millions are on the road again, traveling home after the long Thanksgiving holiday.
2 seconds ago.
It has been the worst month yet for the pandemic in the United States, with over 4 million cases in November alone. And now a fresh concern that the Thanksgiving weekend will turn into a nationwide super spreader event. Top scientist Anthony Fauci has warned of a surge on top of a surge.
I think we're going to be faced with another situation. We're going to have to make decisions as a nation, state, city, and family that we're in a very difficult time, and we're going to have to do the kinds of restrictions of things we would like to have done, particularly in this holiday season, because we're entering into what's really a precarious situation because we're in the middle of a steep slope.
Despite pleas from officials to stay home over the long weekend, an estimated 6 million travelers passed through security at U.S. airports just in the week leading up to the holiday. That made it the busiest week since the pandemic began. Ahead of Christmas and New Year, there's a plea of a different kind. Authorities are begging travelers to at least stick to mask wearing and social distancing.
It is not too late at all for us to do something about this, because as we travel back, to be careful when we go back to where we are, to just continue to do the things that we've been talking about. An important issue, Chuck, is that we know when you mitigate with masks, with distance, with not having crowds or congregate settings, that those states that have done that, you can actually see that the inflection of their curve starts to do this.
All right, let's go to Simon Marks in Washington. And Simon, we heard there for calls for those who traveled over Thanksgiving to now quarantine themselves for a period of time. Well, most ignored the advice the first time round. Do you see them heeding this piece of advice?
Absolutely not, Jill. I mean, there is no indication that anyone in the United States that I've encountered has any plans to quarantine or self-isolate after this Thanksgiving travel, regardless of the guidelines. And that's because they are only guidelines, even though the Centers for Disease Control in Atlanta has described them as strong recommendations. There are no meaningful enforcement mechanisms in any of the states that are requiring quarantine from travellers who are returning from Thanksgiving travel or any other travel for that matter. I mean, here in Washington, D.C., notionally, if you've been off to more than 30 individual states and you're returning to the city, you're supposed to self-isolate. But that's not happening on any meaningful scale. And once again, we're witnessing a major holiday in the United States fueling this fresh wave of COVID-19. First, it was spring break back in late March, when thousands of teenagers descended on Florida and seaside resorts in Mexico. Then it was the July 4th holiday. Then it was Labor Day earlier in the summer. Now, as we begin to approach winter, the Thanksgiving holiday. With every single one of these holiday weekends, there's a massive uptick in COVID-19 infections. And regardless of the warnings from Dr. Fauci and the other public health officials, in the absence of meaningful enforcement and also in the absence of any kind of national leadership on the issue, it's still left up to each of America's 50 individual states to regulate these recommendations. There's no indication that the vast majority of returning travellers are going to self-isolate at all.
And Simon, certainly a vaccine, becoming available soon as the holiday season approaches would be good news. And what's the latest you have for us on that front?
Well, the very latest is that headline that we brought you just before the headlines at 5:30. Moderna saying that they are now ready to apply for emergency use authorization from the Food and Drug Administration for their vaccine. They say they will simultaneously apply for permission to use it in the European Union as well. They say that it could be in the hands of doctors and healthcare professionals to administer at least to frontline workers and the needy by December December the 21st here in the United States. The Pfizer vaccine is being pre-positioned. It has already started to be shipped. Pfizer has confirmed that some flights from Belgium have started to move quantities of the vaccine, even though it's not yet officially authorized for use, but will be very soon. We heard last week that United Airlines here in the United States is also being dragooned by the federal government into the pre-positioning of vaccine. So every indication that the US at least is on track to start vaccinating some people within the next few weeks. The target, 10 million Americans, the government says, could be vaccinated before the end of the year. But of course, that's just a start. It's going to take many, many months for sufficient quantities of the vaccines, plural, to be distributed and then to be jabbed into the arms of people all over the United States and, of course, people all over the rest of the world as well.
Very many thanks for that update there. Simon Marks there speaking to us from Washington.